Well, my mother sang, and my earliest memories are that my mother would sing after putting me to bed, and my father would accompany her on the piano. And of course, I still have that piano. My parents occasionally had a musicale in our apartment, and I do remember, as a very little girl, my father always listened to the New York Philharmonic on Sunday afternoons, and we listened to the Met on Saturday afternoons. And we went to the Lewiston Stadium for opening every year. The New York Phil used to play at the Lewiston Stadium. This is a long time ago. And I just remember Erica Marini, the Tchaikovsky violin concerto, year after year. And so those were, anyway, the beginnings. And obviously, since my dad played, I tried to pick up the piano. And they actually made me wait till I was 5 until my hands were big enough to play. And then I went and had piano lessons. I was a scholarship student from a local school in the Bronx where I lived. And life progressed, and then I was very fortunate to attend the High School of Music and Art in New York City. It was an assumed thing. I didn't really know anything else. I didn't think about anything else. I was always, if you practice, you get to Carnegie Hall, that kind of thing. And in my school was a co-pupil was Roberta Peters. And Roberta came to my house and sang for my mother, and I played for her. And my mother started to cry, and she said, someday you're going to be singing at the Metropolitan Opera. And I thought, oh, mother, oh my God, listen to what my mother is saying. I was so embarrassed that my mother said that. And I think it might have been 7 or 8 years. And then she was there. It really happened. But I continued on to the High School of Music and Art. And in the High School of Music and Art, the pianists were assigned instruments. And I was assigned the French horn, which I fell absolutely in love with the French horn. We had 7 orchestras in the school and a symphonic band. Well, first of all, some of us stood uh, at the Met. Generally, we stood through Wagner. We thought that Wagner was the thing. I remember standing through Tristan and Isolde. My feet did not even hurt at the end of it. And again, I was listening to the Met on Saturdays. I think for me, opera crystallized when I graduated from high school, and I went to the Mannes School before it was a high school, and I, I volunteered to play in the opera department. I was very, very in love with singing and singers. I had some experience at Music and Art. I studied German there, and I studied Lieder. We had Lieder courses, Hugo Wolf. I mean, we learned a great deal of vocal music. It was not opera. But after I graduated and I went on to the Mannes School, and I was playing voice lessons. I was playing for voice teachers. I had the opportunity to play for Martial Sanguier while he was performing at the Met. And Louis Quilico was one of his students. And I learned French from them. I learned the repertoire that he taught, that people came to him for. And it was just like this world was opening up for me. I volunteered at the opera workshop. And after a few years, I had the nerve to present myself to the New York City Opera, and I did get hired. Julius Rudel's first season, he hired me, and I have to say, I knew the first act of Bohème, but I didn't know the second act. I knew the third act of Bohème, but I didn't know the fourth. I had a lot to learn, and I was just cramming music into my head and style into my head. And those years when my children were born, I was in this throes of, I mean, the ecstasy of this wonderful experience of opera and working at the Old City Center, working there and playing and learning. And then I started to play more and more and more auditions where I was learning this repertoire that I would later be propelling as best I could. Well, I've always been told that I have a good ear. I mean, the absolute pitch and all of that. But I don't know, with listening to singers, it's a color of voice that some people just have a color that touches me. It's hard to explain. Like the first time I heard Renee Fleming, she was competing in a competition, and it's the color of the voice that you remember that color. I mean, every singer, of course, has a unique color. No two of them sound alike. But what they choose to give to it, to communicate with it, and how the color can change with a certain emotion or a certain line. It's hard to put this into words. The first time I heard Dmitri Hvorostovsky, I had seen an ad in the New York Times about young singers from the Bolshoi. And there was a concert at Symphony Space, which Archipova was presenting these 4 singers. And I walked in there and I sat down, and out came Dmitri, and he sang Per me giunto with 4 phrases connected. He didn't breathe until the end of the 4. Whoa! I've only heard that once before. And then he sang a Russian folk song called Noch, with unaccompanied. Oh, you fell in love with these sound and what the people can do with the color of their voice. This is their blessing. This is their gift. My good fortune is I heard it. I heard it early. And I heard Renee when she was competing. And part of the winning of this competition is that she sang the final scene from La Sonnambula at Alice Tully Hall as part of the Musicians Emergency Fund competition that she won. I was doing La Sonnambula with June Anderson, and I thought, I will offer her the cover. I wonder if she'll do it. And she not only did the cover, she covered Aprile Milo and Il Pirata, and we also did a chamber music concert in Weil Hall, in which she sang some Russian songs with violin obbligato and me playing the piano. So we kind of basically grew up, in a sense, together. And I encouraged Renee very much with bel canto because I heard that in her voice. I still do. But in the very early years, as somebody who can color and do a crescendo and a diminuendo, and somebody who can interpolate, make up cadenzas like she did in La Dame Blanche. She said, oh, I think I'll do that. Just this creative instinct that could do in this particular style. So other people I just heard, and sometimes people told me about people. My good colleague Paul Pliszka, sometimes he would come back from somewhere. He says, Stephanie Blythe, listen to that voice. You won't hear that very often. So, I had scouts, I guess, also. And since the opera orchestra, we don't schedule as far in advance as the opera companies do. For obvious reasons, we don't have to. And so I would hear a voice, like Aprile Milo, let's say. I heard her sing. We were doing William Tell. And I offered her the cover performance of William Tell, which she did. And we were up at Lehman College in the Bronx. And she interpolated a Maria Callas style E-flat in the concertato of the 3rd act. And somehow people had heard about her. And this Lehman College auditorium was almost packed. We were doing free performances. And in those days, we were able to do orchestra performances with the covers. Aprile made her debut at the Met several weeks later. She was covering, and she went on. So I can't say, why did I find them? They're there. And some people are open to being nurtured, you know, especially I think if I can convince them that I'm there for them. I'm there to make them sound as wonderful as they are, as they can be. And I will always follow them. I will never push them or pull them. And once they get this comfortable feeling with me, then we have this real rapport. We were all called assistant conductors. Not everybody got to conduct. But I did get to conduct rehearsals, and I would occasionally look at the rehearsal schedule and blink and say, oh my God, my name is over here. That's the conductor, there's a pianist. And so I would find myself conducting a complete run-through with chorus and piano of the second act of Bohème. Well, that's already, you better know what you're doing. And in these years I was studying conducting. I had decided I needed to know more. I needed to get a sense of what they feel like, not just as a pianist following the conductor, but as the person propelling it, making it happen, setting the tempi, setting the rubato. And so I started to study. I went back to Mannes School and I studied with Carl Bamberger. And then I studied with Joseph Rosenstock while he was conducting at the Met. He was conducting Figaro and Meistersinger at the Met when I studied with him. Then I started to get invitations. I was invited to Lake George. I conducted Bohème, Tosca up at Lake George. And Oberlin had a summer opera. I went out there and I did a Tosca there. I started to get invitations from people who heard me play. Say I would play an audition I played for a baritone, and Glenn Ross, who was the director of Seattle Opera before Spate Jenkins, said, actually, he said, I'd like to offer you a job. And I said, well, thank you very much. I'm just beginning to conduct, and I'm not accepting any more offers to play the piano. And he said, no, this would be for conducting. I'd like to offer you our national program, or you would be conducting the performances of the national cast. And that was tough, but I had to turn it down because of my family, because Seattle is a tough commute. But my husband overheard me bragging to somebody that I had this offer. And when I hung up the phone, he said, why didn't you tell me? I said, well, there's no point in discussing it. It's not something that I can do right now. He said, if you get any more offers, we talk. And another one fell right into my lap, and that was a symphony in Fort Wayne Philharmonic in Indiana. And I discussed it with him. He said, you know, if you're serious, you have to take it. And I had a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old going to school in New York. So I said, well, what are you going to do? He said, just tell me which one likes the chocolate cupcake, which one likes the vanilla cupcake. I'll carry on. By this time, I had already started Opera Orchestra of New York. I said, what am I going to do? He said, tell me what to do. I said, okay, I need 2 flutes, 2 oboes, 2 clarinets. And he helped me bridge that liaison. So I stayed in Fort Wayne. I was associate conductor, also of the chorus and of the opera. In the years between 1965 and 1970, which I was then working at City Opera, I started the orchestra. Conductors in New York City, of my colleagues who were also studying, everybody was starting up groups to try to obviously get experience conducting. Everybody was starting up groups that were playing chamber music and symphony. I, by this time, felt I had something maybe to offer with the opera repertoire. And so I started an opera orchestra. I discussed with the principal string players at the Metropolitan Opera, Ray Njevik and Johnny Diani and Jascha Silberstein, that I had this idea of training people to play opera. And they told me this is a very important thing to do because we can put in a new player in a Mozart opera or a Wagner opera. But when it comes to Puccini, we cannot do that. There is a training period where they need to learn the style, how to follow the rubato, especially the Verismo. Verismo, the Pagliaccis and Cavallerias. And so they said you would actually be doing a real service if you were doing that. So I not only felt I was doing this service to train musicians because there was no orchestra training people to play this repertoire. And also, I was doing a service to the singers, many of whom would get a job to sing Me and be in the second cast and never have tried it with orchestra. This happened occasionally at City Opera also. So we did it first in the school. We were doing free concerts in the school on the west side. We did our Pagliaccis and Cavallerias and Butterflies and Bohemes, and et cetera, training people. And I, of course, was learning. After a while, one of the sponsors of the National Council, I was also Eastern Regional's accompanist for the competition of the Met, offered me to pay for Opera Orchestra to do a performance in Town Hall. It had a lot better acoustic than the school where we were. So we put an ad in the paper that there would be a free performance of Don Giovanni in Town Hall. Send in stamped self-addressed envelope. We got flooded with orders. We sold it out. It was a free concert. We went into Alice Tully Hall. Lincoln Center opened, Alice Tully Hall opened, and we were the first orchestra to play in Alice Tully Hall. And she actually came to the first concert. Then I was intermixing. We did Les Contes of Men, but I started to experiment. We did Respighi's Belphegor, we did Fedora, Giordano's Fedora, and we did Coronation of Poppaea, Monteverdi, and then we did some other standard operas. After 2 years in Alice Tully Hall, it just we're going to go to Carnegie Hall, and that was that. I had been playing rehearsals for the Friends of French Opera, which did Werther with Nicolai Gedda and La Juive with Richard Tucker. And I became friendly enough with these two gentlemen who were very supportive of my playing. And I said, I want to do this. Is there something you'd like to sing with me in Carnegie Hall? Nicolai just handed me his repertoire. He said, whatever you want, I'd love to do it. And I saw William Tell, and I knew the overture. I thought, wow, there's a whole opera? And as it happens, there's nothing of the overture that's in the opera, but I didn't know that. So I thought, let's do William Tell. What an idea. And Richard wanted to sing Maya Beer l'Africaine. He knew the aria, O Paradiso, which he sang beautifully. And so that's how the first season got started. I cannot tell you anything about whether I thought about money or whether I thought about anything. I just was set on this course. I went to the Paris Opera Library, and while I was looking at the William Tell, it's a big stack of parchment with hand-written music, I was so excited. The very last folio on the bottom said Aria for Jemmy from Guillaume Tell. And I had my recording score with me. Well, there was no aria for Jemmy. What is this? I opened this thing up, and I started, oh my God, he wrote an aria for Jemmy. Where is it? It's not in my score. And then they came to shush me in the library. They were nice enough to copy it for me. And so we, of course, were the first people ever to do that aria. I had to translate it into Italian because we were doing it in Italian. Well, the opera that has received very little attention. The very first Czech opera I did was Dalibor of Smetana. And I heard it, by that time I was listening to reel-to-reels all the time. And I heard this work that's so beautiful. Oh my God. Dalibor, it's a story like Fidelio, similar to Fidelio. So that was the first Czech opera that I did. And I just was so passionately in love with it. I fell in love with the language. I was very fortunate that I had a friend in Eve Graf who was Czech and helped me with the Czech. And I had a flair for it. I could read it, I could pronounce it. Of course, I didn't know what I was saying. And after the Dalibor, then I had to do all the others. And there's another opera that I did also by Smetana, which was Libusha. And Libusha is an opera that they put on every time they reopen the theater, they refurbish the theater, they put it on. And we did that with, that was before Jennifer. I think Jennifer was the last of the Czech operas I did, am I right? There's a final, there's nothing that has survived from Libusha, but there's the final scene is, the words are Český národ neskona, the Czech nation, I can't say it without crying, I'm sorry, will never die. And we did this, I think, in 1988, while people were still hoping that the Czech nation would never die. And the tradition was that people joined hands and they moved from side to side, and a lot of people in my audience did that. So, you know, I cannot say what that could mean, you know. I find that opera in concert has a special element that staged opera doesn't. Now, I've conducted staged opera, and I'm very aware that they're written to be staged. They weren't written to be sung the way I do them. But there is an element of connection and contact with the audience that seems to happen between the singers and me, the singers and the audience, the singers and the orchestra. We all feel it. It's a more personal thing because they don't have to get up and walk at a certain point. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't be staged. They should be staged. But what we can offer, and other opera and concerts can offer, is that you taste the music first. The music is the main inspiration for these works. The composers were the main people who wrote. They picked the work, they picked the drama of the work, but it's the music which we remember, and the composer's name, generally speaking, which we remember. And this is something that opera in concert can offer. And I think, for instance, of me doing the Shostakovich Kovanchina, for the Mussorgsky Kovanchina the first time with the Shostakovich orchestration, because it had been done prior to that, the Rimsky-Korsakov, or the Rusalka and the Jennifer and the Katikabanova in Czech. And here it is without even being staged. It just shows you that these works are viable in Czech. And American singers are very smart and very good in the language. Amazingly good. So I think that that is the main value of it. The audience, they can either look at the super titles if we have them, or they can look at the libretto. Some people still prefer the libretto because they can read more about it, you know. But that is it. It's a personal contact, and I have seen that happen with Caballé, even with a score in front of her. Going back to Leonie Rieseneck, she had told me that she was an actress before she was a singer, and that I don't think, it may be that I'm wrong, but I believe that this was her first opera in concert that she did. And I remember we didn't have anybody staging, but we had decided people would be in a certain place. And we had a prompter. We had John Fiore. It's one of the few times I've had a prompter there, just to help remembering. The other singers were Czech. And there was one point where she was planning to cross the stage and sit down while Yennefer had a long monologue. And as we were at this particular point, I'm conducting, I see Leonie walking over there, and I look over here, and there's no chair. And I think, whoa, wait a minute. What have I done? I'm going to break her concentration and all that. So I hit John Fiore over the head with my stick, and I said, get up and give her your chair. And sit on the floor. And Leonie answered me and said, there will be no need for that. I will be just fine. And she walked over here and she stood the whole 25 minutes. Those things, you know, that just give you the chills. She was so into it. You know, we also have had staging recently, with semi-staging with Ira Sif. Some singers, Aprile Milo and I would say Eglis Gutierrez, they feel more comfortable with somebody actually giving them mental directions, even if they don't walk. I think every work is different. You cannot, you know, have a boilerplate, not for operas, especially operas if nobody knows them, you know. So if I'm going to do Beatrice di Tenda of Bellini with June Anderson, and she hasn't sung it before, and there's a big final scene. There's not a lot of good reason to try to stage that. It puts a bigger burden on the singers. I think Aprile, when we were doing Adriana Lecouvreur, she felt more comfortable. There's such an acting part. She felt more comfortable. So there is Ira Sif, and I'm happy to see everybody do it, you know. It can get tricky if you're murdering somebody. You have to die on the stage. But she managed it. She managed it very well. And of course we did L'Acme with also with the staging, and La Sonnambula. Fortunately, nobody dies. I had one season only where I did 3 operas where nobody died. Now that's not easy. Well, I don't feel like I fought. I'm not that kind of a fighter. Having it emerge slowly after working in an opera company, which is, I think, I have to say, I think it's the best way for a conductor to develop, to be working in the company with other conductors, singers. I had offers to conduct, most of which I was able to do. And when I started Opera Orchestra of New York, I'll say we had 3 stages. We had the first stage in the 3 performances in the school, and then we had the bridge in Alice Dudley Hall, and then the 3rd one in Carnegie Hall. And as the music director, if I invited singers to perform with me, I was never aware that somebody didn't want to come and sing with me at Carnegie Hall because I was a woman or a girl or whatever it was. And I didn't have a sense that orchestra people didn't want to play. I mean, I didn't have any sense of any negativism, and I didn't feel like I needed to fight anybody. Certainly not the audience. The audience couldn't care. I mean, so what's the problem with it, actually? Maybe invitations to conduct. And I had a lot of them. It depends. Maybe I didn't have all of the ones I wanted, but that really didn't enter into my head. I just feel that starting as a conductor is difficult for anybody, for a guy, for a woman, and you usually need some kind of a special focus in order for people to notice you. What I was doing, I didn't expect, because I wasn't doing anything that was new. There were Friends of French Opera. There was also the American Opera Society that was my predecessor and had done spectacular things. But again, what happened was after Gedda sang with me, after Tucker sang with me, other singers came forward. Montserrat Caballé came to me and said, I've heard about you, I've heard about things you're doing. She said, I tip my chapeau to a lady conductor. She wanted to be part of it. And she knew exactly what she wanted to sing. Of course, she had some bel canto operas that I didn't know at all. I was happy to do. Renata Scotto came forward through Bob Lombardo, who's now my manager, who was her manager. And she wanted to do I Lombardi alla prima crociata. I didn't know this piece at all. I was thrilled to do it with her. So people came forward because they liked the format also. So I had this tremendous sense of support. I have to say, I had a very positive feeling about it, and if I didn't get invited to this party, I did get invited to that party. And I don't go anywhere that's not positive. I don't think there's anything productive in it. I've had a wonderful, wonderful 40 years doing the things I really want to do with Opera Orchestra of New York. And every once in a while, somebody invites me to conduct a butterfly or a Tosca, which I can't do with Opera Orchestra of New York, and I'm thrilled. The idea for the Young Artist Program that I feel very strongly about is that the newly entering, those entering the profession at the beginning of their careers, the ones I've been so lucky to find, I want them to have the opportunity to sing with orchestra and with the big superstars. So if somebody's covering, as like Renee was covering, or Aprile was covering, and William Tell, she got to sing duets with Piero Cappuccilli when she was just beginning. I want this interchange because there's so much to be learned. Now, not every soprano is happy to have her cover sitting right there. Not everybody will be as helpful, but just a year or two ago we did La Sonnambula, and I had Ferruccio Furlanetto, and I heard him say to somebody, I want to hear 5 R's rolled when you sing this word. Okay, they're learning something. I could say it 20 times, but they're learning something right from this great basso, about how to sing on a consonant. And so I find this interchange is so valuable between, I try to give them orchestra rehearsal also, and sometimes this happens and that happens, the baritone has to be laid, or the tenor has to be laid, and the soprano gets to sing, or you mix match these people if they're willing, and most of them are gracious about it. Oh yes, and they get so many instances of how to get where it is and how to learn gracefully what they need to do. I mean, they have lots of coaching at the schools, but there is nothing like togetherness, Let's say Carlo Bergonzi, loved young singers, always happy to be singing with them, helping them, coaching them, and it's something they can't get in school. They can only get it in a situation like what I have. I try to get a week or 8 days from everybody, and then there are the days in between that you have to let them rest and let them feel good, and that's the main. Of course, it's a cover program and a small parts program, and sometimes the small parts are covering a big part also, and so that's technically they're getting paid and they're doing something that's also valuable. Also, sometimes when our operas get picked up, the covers suddenly get offers because they're the only people who know the piece. I would say The Pearl Fishes with Nikolai Gedda, because again, I didn't really know this piece, and he did get sick and at the last minute didn't sing the first William Tell. So that's another story where I had to bring two tenors off the street and try to put that together. But several years later, with the Pearl Fishers, he was singing the aria, and he has a legato like nobody has that. And he was doing the aria, and it was really slow, and I wasn't sure, I didn't really know the piece, whether I should try to push him or he's going to be short of breath. Nikolai Gedda, no, not short of breath. And I was debating whether to break into 6 or to stay in 2 and what was doing. And when he went up to the final ascent to the B, he slid up very slowly, and I thought, oh my God, he's not going to make it, he's not going to make it, he's not going to make it, I'm going to spoil it. I didn't spoil it. There it is. You can only think to yourself, this is greatness, and I must not touch it. I can spoil this thing, you know? And that was one moment. And I had another moment also with a tenor, not too long ago. The Marcello Giordani, we were singing William Tell, my third William Tell, this first time in French. And we were doing the aria in the 4th act, which has this impossible cabaletta that ascends up to high C about 9 times. And slowly, 1, da, 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 da. So he sang it, and of course, he had this huge ovation for it, and at the end of the opera, I was tired, and I went and sat down in one of the singer's chairs. And he came over to me and says, I'm going to sing it again. I looked at him. He said, only the cabaletta. Okay, so he's singing the cabaletta, and he's at this side of the stage, and I'm thinking to myself, gee, I wish he would walk over there, because the people on this side are going to complain that they didn't see enough of him. And as I'm thinking it, he dashed over to the other side, shook his fists at the chorus, and he finished the cabaletta. You know, when you have this kind of rapport with people, it's really exciting. I had it with Marcello, and I also always had it with Nikolai Gedda, that he never had to say to me, could you take this slower or faster? Nikolai and I never talked about music. We just made the music. And there are some singers like that it just is so, it's not magic, it's the way it should be. I still have not conducted a whole ring cycle, and I say that would be something. The biggest thrill of my life, I would say, in what I've conducted was when I conducted Tristan and Isolde. That has to be the penultimate joy. I have conducted it 3 times. The last time was in Carnegie Hall. The other times was at University of Maryland. I would like to conduct Die Meistersinger. I have other operas, my namesake, Eva. I would like to conduct some other operas, but by and large, I mean, Donizetti wrote 72 operas. I've only conducted 17 of them. You know, I've only conducted half of the Verdi, believe it or not. There's still Oberto. There's still a few that I haven't done. Of course, I want to do everything, you know. I've conducted half of the Bellini output, about half the Rossini, if you could conduct half of all the Rossini output. And there are treasures. There are treasures there that I still would pursue if I'm given the opportunity. Yes, I think they're coming. As far as whether they will have the dramatic depth to the voice that Caballé did. I mean, she was able to spin and had the depth on the bottom of her voice was so beautiful, too. They have to grow up a little bit. I mean, remember, she sang in Germany for 10 years before any of us were aware, even, that there was a Montserrat Caballé. I think they're there. I think I have found some of them in the last few years, presenting Église Gutierrez and Latonia Moore, Brian Email and Costello and Michael Fabiano. These are young, very good people. Brian is probably going the direction of Marcello Giordani. He just sang Les Troyens. You know, he seems to be able to do the heavy, and Puritani had the top. That and it was one other singer that I wanted to mention that was I didn't. Giuliana Di Giacomo, who is now really blooming. Her voice is wonderful. I think they're there, and there's another one, Megan Miller, who is wow. She's I've been coaching her in Fanciulla del West because she's going to sing it, and I just found her coaching, and I would love to coach her into Meistersinger, but I don't really know it, so I've sent her out. I farmed her out. Yeah, they're there, and they're golden voices. I think if we nurture them, we give them the recognition they should have, I think we'll have another generation. It's just times are different now. I don't know if we can do it anymore. I mean, the Beverly Sills years, Beverly Sills made a fantastic career even before she went to the Met. Iglesias Gutierrez is making a big career, not yet any sign at the Met. You know, Juliana's at the Met. They're being recognized. So, who's going to come in? Where are the Verdi mezzos? I don't know that answer. Where are the Verdi baritones? Again, I don't know that answer because recently I've been judging competitions and they're more malatesta. So we need to find them, nurture them, and keep this fantastic art form, and keep the public passionate. That's what we want. The other thing I haven't mentioned that I really want to is that I was a pianist at the City Opera the first time that Placido Domingo came to the company. And we did a full run-through, stage run-through on the third floor of Carmen. And I was the pianist, and Julius was conductor. And so I heard that voice for the first time. I came home and told Stanley, we have a new tenor. Whoa, what a voice. What a gorgeous instrument. And what a relaxed, nice guy. What an accessible person. I was so blown away. Because the whole company fell in love with Placido right away. And I said, and he has this beautiful name, like Peaceful Sunday. So for me, being in the right place at the right time in the 1960s, playing for these wonderful singers, of course, and I didn't mention that Placido was, of course, interested in working together with me with Opera Orchestra of New York, and he chose Francesca da Rimini by Zandonai, which I didn't know anything about it. And I'll never forget the beauty, the sensuousness of this music. Zandonai scored it for a viola pomposa, which is a 6-string cello, which somehow Jascha Silberstein got his hands on. And it was also scored for a bass flute, which I was not familiar with that color. And especially in the love duet, I cannot tell you, the music was so sensuous without any staging. It was, oh my God. And so we did this thing together. And the Met picked it up a few years later. I was thrilled that they did that, I guess not because of me, but because of Placido and Renato Scotto. And then Placido and I also did Le Cid, which I didn't know. I knew the one aria, which he knew, and he wanted to sing Le Cid. And so we did what I think was a really spectacular performance, which was then recorded. Like a discovery. What a beautiful, noble piece of music. This is a noble piece of music. And they all have their different things. And I wondered why no company picked up Le Cid. I've often wondered that. Of all the operas that I've done, that I think, okay, it's hard to do a war with a guy on a horse. You know? It's hard to stage it. But of all, if you could ask me which of the operas that I've done that I wonder why nobody's picked up, I would say La Cid, Rienzi. Rienzi, I've done it 3 times, I'm going to do it again. Why nobody has picked up this noble, wonderful work, I don't know. I guess it's hard to stage. They do stage it in Berlin. And why would nobody stage William Tell? What a piece, sort of masterpiece this piece is. Why doesn't anybody stage Les Huguenots? Where are you guys? What are you doing? It's time.